Greetings. It is December 12th, 2018, and we are marking the 100th anniversary of the birth of singer Joe Williams, a dear friend of Hamilton College, recipient of an honorary degree in 1988, and co-founder of the Fillius Jazz Archive, along with Milt Fillius, class of 1944. My name is Monk Rowe. I'm the Joe Williams director of the Fillius Jazz Archive. We're marking this occasion with a film for you to watch, excerpts and outtakes from a film we commissioned in 1996, A Portrait in Song, ably and creatively directed and produced by Burl Crone. You'll hear Joe talking about his childhood in Chicago, his stint with the Count Basie Orchestra, his 4 decades plus solo career, and we'll also get some insights into the way he tried to live his life. Along the way, you're going to hear from John Levy, his longtime manager, Norman Simmons, his accompanist, and Bill Hughes and John Williams, members of the Count Basie Orchestra. I hope you enjoy the film, and I'd like to suggest that afterwards you get out your LPs or your CDs or MP3s, and whatever way you can revisit the music of Joe Williams, you'll be reminded of what a unique artist he was. I hope you enjoy it.
I didn't know that scar was so prominent in those days on my left cheek. That happened when I was 7 years old in the playground at Carter School. Some older boys tricked me into walking under a swing. Swing. I woke up in the office, then principal's office. My aunt took me to the doctor, and they promised me ice cream if I didn't cry. So I didn't cry until I got the ice cream. Put 4 stitches in that. That was when I was, so that was 70 years ago. Practically almost 70 years. Yeah, 77 in December, I guess. Yeah. And, you know, you'd say, Chicago Defender, Chicago Defender. And you'd hear on Sunday mornings, which I never sold Sunday papers because I always went to church, you'd hear, Sunday morning papers.
Joe was a star before he was a star. I didn't know if he knew me or not, but we had a club in Chicago called Club de Lisa. And in Chicago, we worked 5 days a week. We started at 10 o'clock and finished at 4. And on Saturdays, we started at 10 and finished at 5. We worked Sundays, maybe sometimes a matinee, but Sunday night would be the same 10 to 5, and we got paid on Sunday. Yeah, Sunday, but like almost every other day, we get paid, then we go out and have breakfast. So you're talking about breakfast till like 7 o'clock. So about 7:30, they had the breakfast dance at Club de Lisa, which means this was the show that they gave for all the performers and the bartenders and all the night people who got paid on Sunday. And they would, of course, everybody came in, all the nightclub owners, and everybody would come to Club de Lisa at 7:30 in the morning. And Joe, they would do the breakfast show.
Because we played for dancing. And then later on, when I started working in clubs, starting in 1938 and 39, with Jimmy Noon's orchestra, we did a lot of broadcasting. I had been working at the Cotton Club in Chicago at 62nd and Cottage Grove. And I left the house and I left my apartment and stopped by tell him goodbye because I was going to New York to join bass. And he sent me a money order telegram. I never forget that. So I went in, and Bill Martin, the trumpet player, he's since died, he put his arms around me. He's a bear of a man, trumpet player. And he said, when you get out there in front of thousands and thousands of people, man, holler, mother, holler.
I guess it was a historical moment for Bates's band. And I was there.
There must have been some scrambling to come up with arrangements.
You know, the first, I think for about the first week, this band at that point was very good at setting riffs, and all Joe did was sing blues. So we were just like setting section riffs behind Joe, and he was doing his thing. And pretty soon, he did this song, Every Day I Have the Blues. And we started setting these riffs behind him, and the thing really got swinging. So what happened was Ernie Wilkins was sitting there, and he was listening to these riffs, you know. And a lot of those riffs that he wrote out, we were already doing them by the time he put them on paper. Of course, the introduction and all that, you know, he did on his own. But I think he did the majority of the writing for Joe for the first month or two, and then Frank Foster joined in. And I think Frank West did a couple. And pretty soon he was taking up, I think, half of the band sets. You know, we'd do half and he'd do half. He got popular very fast.
As a leader, he was, I watched him, observed him. He never saw mistakes. If something that those of us who knew felt was like, gee, that wasn't what we do 98 times out of 100, you know. That was an accident. That was something that, you know. And so instead of looking where it came from, he'd always be, he happened to be looking someplace else. Hey, somebody over there. You know, you missed it. You never heard it. But when you did something marvelously unusual, he would go, he'd light up like a Christmas tree. What I learned from him was that when you were working with first-class musicians particularly, or any musician for that matter, you live with what they contribute. You don't have to give them direction necessarily or anything. Let them find their own level of what goes in support of what, according to their own depth, you know, and perceptions. You have to, and that way you get an unusual presentation, and one that is always refreshing to you, and you don't get tired. I know people who did the same thing every night for a long time, and then finally the doctor told them, well, I'm afraid you have to quit that because it's killing you. You know, really. And they had to stop performing because they weren't adding any new material to their performances. But the same routine, you know, again and again and again and again. Like last night, I made at least 3 different changes in what had been prepared for a program. One before we even started. You know, I just looked at it and said, oh, no, I'm gonna move that to here. Yes, all right now. And then get out and then change it again out there, you know, because like, that's how I felt it should have gone. And you have to have the freedom to do that. I kid Mr. Simmons when I put him on, and I put him on at Carnegie Hall, and the people raved, you know, at his performance. And he finished, and told him, he said, you know, It's all right until you get an encore. And the first time you get an encore, then you need a new job. You're just a kid, you know. I don't mean it. If he ever gets an encore, I'll be happy, pleased for him, you know. Because Basie was like that with me, like you say. He encouraged me in every way possible. He made a positive. Any negative thoughts that I had, he got rid of them. You know, for instance, we talked about that, fighting him to get new material, as opposed to doing the same thing over and over again. You know. If I wanted a job, I would have gotten one. I didn't want a job. But my thing with Norman is, they give him it's a grand reception. He stands up, takes 2 or 3 bows, and I just, oh yes, that's nice. That's very nice. So, it's good to be king. And he falls completely on the floor. You're fooling around, no, oh no. I don't like you no more. Yeah, I haven't done that in 100 years. I haven't done it, in fact. Like a worn out hat, 2-time lover, and a something like flirt, full-time flirt, yeah. I'm gonna do the town. Won't stand your fooling around, no, oh no. I don't like you no more. I don't like you no more. No. I don't like you no more. Yeah. Oh boy. Another reason why you change material too, you keep getting new material, something to do. That's why I fought Basie so hard. You know. He asked me, did I know anything of Jimmy Rushing? I told him, no, I didn't. And I didn't, really. It would have been a simple matter for me to learn. I could have learned his stuff in one night and performed it. But that was not the object of the exercise. I wasn't singing 1930s, 1940s, you know, or even 1950 music. I was adding things that I wanted to do, that I wanted to present, and so. And I'm glad it found favor, not only with the musicians, but with people, the audiences as well. When I left the band, I could have laid off a year. But as it was, we did 46 weeks. I went out with, to Harry Sweets Edison and a quintet and a valet. And we did 46 weeks the first year that I was away from the band. When you're doing something that you enjoy, it doesn't seem like work. You know, I had an older man to tell me years ago when I was in my 20s. He fixed breakfast for me one morning, and we were sitting around talking. He said, kid, the time to save money is when you're making some. Because if you're not making any money, you can't save anything. And I remembered that. So while I was working, I saved my money, that's all. I didn't see anything to, you know, any reason to throw it away or to, as we call, showboat. I try to be a big man in New York City. Gosh, dumb Dum, da, dum, dum. Who are you going to impress, you know?
I may do Joe, I do Carmen, I do all kind of people, but he's doing his repertoire all the time. So refreshing and renewing has to happen right within the music. So when you get good jazz singers, they love for you to toy with it. And that's one thing I enjoy with Joe. They can hear, you know, and Joe is almost more adventurous than a lot of them I know, even though they can hear. Because Joe has such confidence as a jazz vocal musician that he sort of enjoys the challenge of knowing that he can fit with you. So it means that whereas a lot of singers are looking for a great pianist who know how to fit, Joe's requirements is not as high because he enjoys the idea that I can fit. So I questioned that one time because I was working on a book about accompanist and I interviewed him, and his criteria wasn't as much, and yet still his ear is as sharp. He knows who is good and what is not good, but he has that kind of confidence in himself and the enjoyment of the adventure. So one of the things in our group is this constant toying with the stuff, you know, and it keeps him from getting old, keeps me from getting old, you know, because it doesn't become predictable. No matter how often we play the same stuff, Henry Johnson and I in particular, we're going to find some kind of way to mess with it. So therefore, we always have joyful reunions, you know, because we're always tinkering with the music.
First of all, we're not talking about accompanist here. Those of us that understand what transpires between a piano player or a guitarist or an orchestra and a soloist, be it voice or one of the other instruments, is one, what they do, they support the soloist. You make a statement, like the statement might be in the blues, say, "You don't love me and I don't even care." Now there's a space there for piano, a guitar, or a horn to comment about that. People are laughing. The language has, you know, the people are laughing because they don't expect that. You know, they expect, "You don't love me and I'm sad as I can be." Instead, you say, "You don't love me and I don't even care," you know, and right away, people are laughing. Now, what the piano or guitar or an instrument does is say, yeah, that's so, I know it is, and then lead into the next phrase harmonically, you see. And where a lot of people don't know what's happening or what it's about. You see, a lot of the young people, I'm afraid, are making the mistake of percussion instruments particularly, that if something is happening and people say, yeah, then they would like to do it as well. I can do that too. And they do it right. They do it with you instead of adding something to what should, you know, is what you should do. You should be able to listen to it and corroborate, maybe. You know, make a corroborative statement as opposed to, yeah, I can do that too.
What makes me a great accompanist is Duke Ellington first to start with. Duke is what I heard through the floor, and Duke is what I tried to copy. And the thing about Duke Ellington is Duke Ellington wrote for his men, the men in the band. And when I started to play the piano, I didn't start as a piano player. I started copying Duke's band. So it was good to have someone else play the melody while I just make up the arrangement. So in accompanying, I always feel like I am creating an arrangement behind the vocal line. And there's a great freedom there because I don't have to search for the vocal line. It was a long time before I could even find a vocal line on the piano. But I was creating the harmony and the rhythm, and I got a great kick out of that. And in Chicago, where I was born, it's a rhythm town. So again, that was like a real enjoyment of just being in the rhythm section, being able to make things happen as opposed to being out on the front line. For a long time, I didn't know how to maybe take a solo. I knew how to play in the background. So I think that that has a lot to do with it. The fact that I see accompaniment as creating, composing, arrangement behind the vocal line.
Even when I was with the band, I would spend the days. I lived at 52nd and Broadway, and at 53rd and Broadway is at Ed Sullivan Theater. And let's see, besides Ed Sullivan, Gary Moore used to broadcast from there on CBS. Gleason, Jackie Gleason, he used to broadcast from there. And in the summer replacements, they had Andy Williams one summer. And How Much Is That Dog in the Window? She did a summer replacement. The young lady that sang that. Pretty little girl from Oklahoma or something like that. And she was a summer replacement there. And I'd spend time. After lunch, I would go in there and sit and hang in the theater. I wound up sitting in the manager's office and in with the directors of the show and the producers, and they'd come in and sit down beside me in the theater. I'd sit there watching and listening and observing, you know. I hung out with the people in television. I did gosh, he's off the air now. Mike Douglas. In 1961, we were in Cleveland, Ohio, and he was there at Westinghouse, and a block away from the hotel where I lived, the studio was, and I used to do the show almost every day. And then I did a television segment there that they, which was our show. Just me and Harry Sweets Edison, Jimmy Forrest, and the guys in the rhythm section. I've forgotten who they were now. And I hung out with television and in television. Every city we went to, I would do television and radio. So I didn't need recordings to make a connection with the public. I was in Chicago once walking down Rush Street, and some strange lady came bouncing down the street with her husband and a party of people. She said, "It's Joe Williams. We see him all the time. Well, Mike Douglas, Joe Williams. Hey, you know, hi, how are you?" Turns out there was a dairy convention in town, and these people knew me. I worked at the Holiday Inn in Chicago on the lake, and every year they would have us come in there in the fall of the year, 4 weeks or 2 weeks at a time. The manager came to me and said, "You're the only person working here who can really sustain 4 weeks, you know." Because 4 weeks, the way I work and the way I like to change material and stuff, you know, like, I couldn't do the same thing 4 weeks. I am bored to death. You're doing the same thing. So I found out something. The hardware people, you know, they have conventions in Chicago every year, and with their new products and what have you. And they were fans. They'd check into the hotel, and they'd occupy the rooms every night and bring other people in as well. So I made many friends in television. Needless to say, I did Johnny Carson about 60 times. They counted up once, but I did Carson more than any other jazz artist. And I did this Merv Griffin show many, many times. I did it when he was in. First time I did Merv Griffin, he was auditioning to take Jack Parr's spot on that Tonight Show in New York City. Then he got his own show and his own theater, a little theater off Times Square, right next to Zardy's. And had Arthur Treacher there with him, Frank West, Billy Taylor and the orchestra and what have you. And I did his show often. That was the first time I saw this little guy that dances in the Godfather of Soul, they call him, James Brown. First time I saw him, really, on that show with his group. And Steve Allen, did Tonight Show with Steve Allen when he had Steve and Edie on. And Doc Severinsen was playing in the orchestra, and Skitch Henderson was the leader of the band. And we did that show, Steve. And when we went to the coast, and had Don Trenner and Frank Russolino and that group in his orchestra out there, I did his show again out there. I did Art Linkletter's show on the coast often. You know, I still see Art every now and then. We embrace walking down the street. And I love it, a book he wrote. I didn't read, I got to get it too. Growing Old is Not for Sissies. As the pains come, one place or another. But I did a lot of television. I did Dinah Shore. I did Perry Como's television show. Gary Moore, not once, but several times. And Carol Burnett was on the show, and I did it. Gave it Durward Kirby and folks like that. And I'm sure I must have left out people, but it's not intentional because, and there was Cosby here late when he was as hot as anybody's ever been. For another generation also, you did Sesame Street, and the young people came up to me here to make, oh boy, and coming, having a picture made, wanted to be, from Sesame Street. And when you have that know-how, or you have the facility to do it, and you're able to do it, it's nice because it puts you in the homes of America. And after you've been in there so much, you become, as Billy Eckstein used to say, you become a part of Americana.
It's it's difficult for me to, because all I can say is great things about the man. It sounds like, and he is. He's great. Joe Williams is great. Out of all of the people that I've managed over the years, Joe is on top person. And I've handled some pretty big ones,
Start by imitating. You don't be afraid to imitate someone. He said we all did. And you go from imitation to assimilation. And from assimilation to innovation. But you can't improvise if you don't know the melody.
I always like to say that if Joe Williams isn't the greatest singer in the world, there's none greater. And in reference to being a human being, I think that one of the greatest attributes that a human being could have is good manners. And this is the one thing that I noticed about him that made him set him apart from many of the other performers with whom I'd worked. Basie used to say, God doesn't like ugly, in reference to people who are ill-mannered. And I could see why he was proud to call Joe his number one son, because Joe always, from the moment I met him, was a person who had very good manners. And it starts with self-respect. He had self-respect, so it was very easy for him to show us respect. And I just didn't feel like a lowly baritone player who had very few solos to play, just an ensemble player, a guy on the making the front line sounding good, trying to support the front line. I felt just as important in Joe's presence as one of the feature musicians, you know. So anyway, good manners was the thing that really caught my attention, you know.
I can embellish that, really. Yeah. Several years ago, I think it was at 72 maybe, Duke Ellington had his fellowship, not fellowship, what is it? Oh, the Conservatory Without Walls at Yale University, and Kingman Brewster was there presenting medals to those of us that Ellington chose to be a part of that. I forget about it. I've got this marvelous medal that I'm a Yale fellow, you know, and I forget about it half the time because it's in a little styrene plastic thing in a case at home. But Marian Anderson couldn't be. Marian Anderson, the colored tour, the mezzo-soprano from the Metropolitan concert stage, couldn't be there to receive her medal, and I was asked to receive it for her. And I remembered something that her mother told her. Wherever you go and whatever you do, darling, someone might be watching and would like to be like you. Please try not to disappoint them. And so when you ask about how I see it, I said each one of us has a radiance of our own that people could see us and say, gee, I think I'd like to assimilate some of that, you know, incorporate that maybe, and thus we become extensions of each other. I mean, and a positive extension of the one thing that brought us here in the first place, love. The Pope wrote some marvelous lyrics, prose years ago when he was a priest, and they wrote some music to it, and Sarah Vaughan recorded it. I don't know if you heard. Did you hear any of that? Oh, marvelous thing. He says the miracle. We are the miracle. We are the miracle. You know, the greatest miracle of it all. You know? He talks about how people, I am many people, all trying to speak through me, and what have you, and I with problems of my own, foibles. He says of my own. You know, I have my own faults, you know, and this is the Pope talking as a priest. And we all, I think, we all, it's like Jack Kennedy, I think he knew what he was saying. He said, God's work is our own. And we must do it. And we must relate to each other. And I don't know how many of us there are, but here we are. The direct result of love itself. And I was fortunate enough to go to church at a time when they were trying to explain these miracles to us, or at least give us an area which we could research and delve into in our minds, you know. A minister said, God is love. And then suddenly, a young boy began to say, okay. It was when I was a kid, and I'd feel a cold spoon on my lips, and I'd open my mouth, and someone would put ice cream in. Take some and leave some. And I find that applies to almost everything, including eating, or, you know, or playing, or working, whatever. Take some and leave some. You cannot get it all forget that. Yeah. That's been done, and they're all dead. Those that got it all. Yeah. Yeah. I wrote a thing. I wrote a couple of things, actually. But one in particular, because of the way things have turned out for me, those who seek the harmony of life rather than the discord truly inherit a kingdom of love. Things that are very, very good, you should share, I think. If you, I was very young, about 16, I guess, or 17, and I was sitting in a nightclub, and some people were performing, and I happened to be sitting with the guy that ran the place. And I said, I can sing better than that, you know. And he said to me, you just sit here and pay attention. Bring him some apple pie and some ice cream, some coffees. And I vowed within myself then that if ever I found someone who wanted that microphone as badly as I wanted it then, I would share it with them. My manager gives me, John, he used to give me hell about it because he says, you share your space and your time, with the musicians and everything. So you'll have people say, just like, wow. And you'll say, put the attention on somebody else, the spotlight on someone else, He said, then you have to go back, and then he's got to go back and grab them again. Well, I feel as though I can. I can afford to present someone because I don't have to stand there and have that. Keep that spotlight on me now. Hey, you put that spotlight back over here. I'm over here. That kind of. I don't have to do that. I don't think. Besides, when you're 6'1", 215 pounds, and black, you seem bigger than you are anyway. As they say in Sweden, shall we go now?